On November 24th, 1971, Flo Schaffner was working as a stewardess for Northwest Orient Airlines on Flight 305 on what would have been yet another boring trip. Earlier, she had taken the drink orders of the passengers, one of whom had requested bourbon and 7 Up. He wore a dark suit and had a black raincoat that he refused to take off, alongside an attache case that he kept in the seat beside him next to the window. Flo, meanwhile, prepared for the flight to leave Portland, Oregon behind until the man in the raincoat handed her a note. Thinking it was yet another love letter written by a smitten passenger, Flo paid it no mind and put it into her purse to discard later, until the man says, I think you better have a look at that note. As the plane ascended into the sky, Flo read the letter, finding a message that said, Miss, I have a bomb here, and I would like you to sit by me. After initial confusion and disbelief, Flo conceded to the hijacker's demands, beginning the grand tale of the hijacking of Flight 305 at the machinations of the enigmatic man of mystery known as D.B. Cooper. Here we have one of the most compelling mysteries of history, and the successful hijacking of Flight 305 alongside the subsequent disappearance of D.B. Cooper, which we will be discussing tonight on Friday Night Frights. I'm your host, Christian Ashley of Systematic Geekology, here to terrify and instruct you all on the weird, unusual, fascinating, fantastical, and unexplainable things that may or may not lurk out there in the world. I am joined by my co-host, Joe Day. How's it going, Joe?
Hey, glad to be doing this again.
Oh, yeah, man. This is a fun thing to do once a month, just to flex the muscles a bit, do some research, have some fun. I'm all for it. So, yeah.
I love your your intro. As somebody who does a good intro bit, the way that you kick these things off is always spectacular. What kind of life must it have been when she's just like, this is just another love note, and that's fine. That's normal, right? That's just just get
the casual
just get love
sexism of the 60s and 70s, you know?
Fair.
That's the life she lived.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I read that detail. I was like, oh my gosh, you poor woman.
Right.
But no, it was just reality. So, guys, get back on track. Just as a reminder, our schedule is to once a month cover one of 6 categories. They are cryptozoology, the paranormal, religious strangeness, the weird and the unexplained, true crime, which we're doing this month, and ufology. This episode was voted by SG fans on the Priest of the Geeks page on Facebook. So if you'd like to have a say on our next topic, which we'll be talking about how we're going to be shaking things up for the next 6 months in a bit, then please head over there and join. So, Joe, what is your history with the discussion revolving around DB Cooper and Flight 305?
So first time I ever heard of DB Cooper was through the show Unsolved Mysteries. They did a featurette of on this, and it's fascinating, right? Because I'm not usually like a big true crime fan, but it is one of the things about it that is fascinating to me is how many things have gone unsolved just because science has not caught up with the crime. You know what I mean? Like today, to think about somebody just hijacking a plane and nobody knows who this person is, and all of that is like that's impossible now in today's world.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing too, because like this just used to be a thing that just kept happening at this point in time. Like in the 50s, it used to be a positive thing in some respects, and that there would be people from on the other side of the Iron Curtain would hijack a plane and say, "Hey, I'm going to seek asylum in the West." And yeah, you still have the ethical issue of you're hijacking a plane so you can reach freedom. So that was a nice thing. Then people started doing the reverse in America. They do it to get to Cuba because of their own political ties. And then you get people doing it like we have for Cooper here for money. And you could just walk on the plane and not be like for him. He literally shows up and says, "Hey, I want to get on this flight." No, I don't know, like screening or anything. Just $20 paid on the flight.
Yep.
It's so fascinating to see where we were, even forgetting, but even before that, thinking, what were we doing? Why were we not screening people more? We just a simpler time, some people would say.
Yeah, I guess so.
But as for me, I cannot remember when I first heard about this case. It surely would have been reading a book of mysteries or like something in the unexplained and the DB Cooper case. Like, who was this enigmatic man? He just showed up, uh, demanded money, was very polite and affable, even joked around with the crew. But then you had this whole thing. It's like he jumps off a plane in the middle of a storm. Like, did he survive? And that
Right.
whole and the money was found later on, but it wasn't every bit. It was like just part of it. Did he lose it along the way? Did he die uh falling to the ground? Did the parachutes not go off? Or did he successfully escape? And he's one of the greatest criminal masterminds of all time. There's a lot to be found here.
Could you imagine being a dude that like you see these news broadcasts, right? And you see all of this stuff and you just are sitting back and watching people looking for you but knowing nobody knows anything. Like nobody like you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
such an odd thing to think about.
Yeah, just the different criminal minds that come up in stuff like this. Because there's some people they just want to do it for the attention. I mean, you get like even someone like the Zodiac killer who sought attention, and yet was never caught, like because of police fumbling and stuff like that. For Cooper, there's radio silence. And is that because he didn't make it? Is that because he's a smart criminal and he didn't say anything and he didn't tell anyone what he did? He just enjoyed the fruits of his labor? Like, what's going on with this? Yeah.
Yeah. It's part of it's part of what I think humans find so compelling about like true crime studying like I don't know about you, but in my childhood, whenever this sort of topic would come up, it was always Manson. Everybody would be pointing to
Mm,
Manson, like as like what it would be like to just analyze his mind. Somebody so enigmatic, somebody so charismatic, somebody so with so many like I guess leadership skills, cult of personality, the whole nine yards. And these stories live on, I think, in legend in certain ways where like sure I see all of the scientists right now that are pushing the envelope and trying to with new with new scientific procedure, potentially being able to some are saying give you the identity by the end of 2024 sort of thing. Like I get why you would want to be that person, to be the one that like
you cracked the
it
code.
identifies the perpetrator. But also I think there's a subsect of people that don't want the legend to die, because once you give it a name, then it's not a legend anymore.
Yeah, I get that. I don't agree, but I get it. I like, hey, like, yeah, it's fascinating that we don't know who it is, but I want to know who it is. I want to know what happened. Like, in very stark contrast to my beloved co-host Joshua, despise ambiguity in all its forms.
Yeah.
I need the concrete. I need you to give me the willing to everything involving in this. And when it comes to something like this, yeah, I can make my own guess, but still not there. So I do find it fascinating not knowing. There's also that, but what if we did know? What if we actually do know the culprit's name, but they got away with it, or they're dead already, and there's nothing we can do? Or what
Right.
if what if it's someone who's never been mentioned before?
Right.
Yeah. So let's get to the actual events of the hijacking as such. So I'm going to start off by just calling this man Dan Cooper, and there's a specific reason for that. That will be revealed along the way, because that is how he introduced himself. The DB will come later on. There are multiple stories about how that happened. So Dan Cooper, as he's sitting down beside Flo, uh, revealed that he has in the contents of his attaché case 4 red sticks that she assumes to be dynamite. Now, is this an actual bit of dynamite? Is there an actual bomb? There's really depends on our profiling of this person. Would they actually be willing to do it? And without them actually being there in the interrogation room, kind of hard to tell. It could just be a bluff. It could actually have had all their lives in danger, including his own.
Right.
So what he did was he asked, and feel free to interrupt me at any point in this. Uh, he asked for $200,000, which I didn't. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't look up the conversion rate to now to see how much that would be. Definitely
Right.
more than $200,000 with inflation. So he asked it in negotiable American currency, and that's some economics term that I don't really care too much to explore. That's why some people thought he might actually be foreign, because as I understand it, he in negotiable currency means you can use it in other nations a little better than regular currency. I know
Yeah.
nothing about economics. I just use cash to pay stuff with.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
different exchange rate where you can it's used for certain international trips from certain like in between certain countries.
okay. Thank you for dumbing it down for simpletons like me. So, as well as asking for the currency, he also asked for 2 front parachutes and 2 back parachutes, leading a lot of them to think, oh, he wants someone else to come with him. Now, Cooper as well asked that a stewardess be by his side at all times. That's way he could always manipulate the scene, some people think.
Mhm.
He always had some control over the situation, and he would switch between 2 stewardesses, Flo and Tina, both of whom were concerned that when they realized he wanted 2 of each of these parachutes, that he would have taken one of them with him as a hostage and potentially even do much worse to them. Now, it did not end up that way, so thank God that didn't happen, especially if he made it or not. I'd rather he didn't drag along someone else for that fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the flight stayed in the air far longer than usual, about 2 hours, if I recall correctly, due to these events. It was supposed to be a simple 28, 30 some minute flight uh, that the people were just going to get off on. So the pilots explained to the passengers, not wanting them to know that they were at the moment being ransomed, uh, and not wanting some cowboy hero to just show up and try and solve the case on his own, that
Right.
they were just having some mechanical issues. And this caused some minor discord in the group, as it certainly would, 2 hours beyond what you thought you'd be staying in the air. But ultimately, that is nothing of importance. There was some close calls. There was actually a guy they call like this cowboy that we don't really have the name of, who was like getting up in arms about this situation, but he obviously didn't know about the bomb. Otherwise, things may have gone way worse. So, in the process of this, as information is being fed to the FBI, to local law enforcement in the area, a reporter in Portland asked the member of the FBI giving his speech, disclosing what was happening to them, what the suspect's name was. And the man said Dan Cooper. Now, in this telling of the story, the reporter misheard his name and asked if he had said D as in dog or B as in boy. And in answer to that, he got the affirmative. So the agent misunderstood him. He misunderstood the agent. So that created the moniker of DB Cooper. There is another story that in the aftermath of the investigation, a local of Portland named DB Cooper was indeed interviewed by officials for his possible involvement in this case. And when a reporter reported on that, it erroneously got tied to him, thinking he was the actual main suspect. So a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Hence, we get DB Cooper instead of Dan Cooper.
Right. Yeah, that's so when I was researching for the episode, it was more of the latter that I had heard, that this dude who was local to the area, his name got used. And so the cops come talk to him. They clear him, he's got an alibi, it's not him. But that moniker sticks,
Yes.
and all of that. So you're probably dead on. It's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Yeah. Just one of those things that just, it's a game of telephone that doesn't end up where you wanted it to,
Right.
which are all games of telephone. So after that, the plane did land at the Seattle Tacoma airport. The money and parachutes were given to Cooper one by one by using the stewardesses as kind of the go between the FBI and the airport officials and so on and so forth. That way, he could always keep an eye on her. She would always bring it back. And the passengers were let go. The hostages were released, minus the flight crew. which you need someone to fly the plane. And it didn't seem like he had experience with these commercial aircraft. And even then, that's a high ask to do it by yourself. So the flight then left. No one stormed the plane, thank God, knowing there's a potential bomb on there. I mean, you got to figure if the ATF was involved like they were in Waco, this would have gone way differently. So
Yep.
glad they weren't there. At this point in time, he ordered them to leave the plane unpressurized. This was so that he could just jump off whenever he pleased. I know nothing about air travel, aviation, so I'm assuming this is incredibly unsafe. That's not the way planes are supposed to be up in the air.
Yeah.
I assume they're supposed to be pressurized for a reason, but that's what he ordered. So they did what he asked him to do because he was the one with the bomb, fake or not.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. So the idea, well, the estimation of the motive would have been that with the way that he was saying to fly the plane, it would have it was only for very, very low to the ground travel. So like just take off and that sort of thing, coming in for a landing, that all of that. So the fear was that flying like that and trying to maintain a cruising altitude at that, or trying to maintain cruising at that altitude, could have caused the plane to just drop out of the sky. But the idea being is that that would be lower, thus maximizing his likelihood of being able to survive, knowing, like him already knowing that his exit strategy was to just jump.
yes. And indeed, that was the plan. Like he told them faulty information that he wanted to go all the way to Mexico City. This was an obvious lie that he was told, hey, if you're going to fly the plane this way, we're going to lose fuel way more rapidly. So we're going to have to leave and drop at Reno at one point in time. And he agreed to that as a condition, knowing he was already going to be jumping beforehand. But they didn't know what he was planning. So they agreed to this. Then around 8 p.m. that night, as it was raining and storming outside and very bad winds, he left them behind, told them he was going, jumped out of the plane around the Mount St. Helens area. And this is a very wide area of Washington/Oregon that is cast over a net of like exactly where he could have been. This being an example of the plane, here is kind of the search area for
Right.
those of you watching. And then was promptly never seen again, as far as we know. So, Joe, before we head any further, what do you think?
So, it's funny. This is Friday Night Frights. I'll talk about an example of a mentality that's drawn and illustrated quite well in a horror movie. Annabelle Creation. For those of you that don't know, it's the James Wan verse centered around Ed and Lorraine Warren. One of the spinoffs was Annabelle, and series of movies, one of which being the creation of the doll. And it's set during Helter Skelter. And so that gives you a time frame of what, and the whole movie starts off with a really intense home invasion scene. And along the way, you see how the wife has been scarred mentally and physically from the attack, and there's this shift that's taking place because dude doesn't lock his door. The husband doesn't even think, it doesn't even cross his mind that oh shuck gee willikers, nothing bad is gonna happen, sort of thing. But having grown up around folks that were older, I've had those conversations where that really was like a very legitimate shift that started to take place right around the time of like Manson and some of the more widespread dissemination of information started taking place, at least at scale, right? We're talking about the
Yeah.
60s. We cannot in any way, shape, or form compare that to the fact that we live in the information age currently. But there's this shift that took place of this couldn't happen to me, or this doesn't happen, or somebody doesn't have this information that they would need to be able to do this, or at least such a specialized select few have that information, that it would make it, the odds of something like this happening are somewhere in between slim and none.
Yeah.
And I happen to be in a, I find this particularly unique looking at this story now, because I haven't read about, like I said, I'm not like out of the buffet of topics and topic pillars that we go through on this show. True crime stands as one of those that I'm like, you're way more likely to find me needing to study up on something and actually learn about it than like brush up on it and those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
so I haven't looked at this and at this stuff in quite a while. Actually, probably since I got my start in podcasting when I was working with the Innocence Project, doing production work for them. That was when I like really got into true crime, because I was producing for a true crime show, so I figured I should know the material, all of that sort of stuff. And looking at it now, having been around my wife's late grandfather, this unassuming, I don't know, definitely shy of 6 foot. We're probably talking like, I don't know, 5'6", 5'7" dude that is so unassuming. Bro built a plane. And when I say built a plane, I'm talking from soup to nuts, from the ground up, built a friggin' plane. And like got it up in the air in the whole 9 yards. And we're talking about this process having started, and him being at an age where he didn't grab his phone and look up a YouTube tutorial. He didn't do that sort of thing. Like, there's already handbooks, there's already information. Now, yes, he's ex-military, but like a lot of this stuff was built off of learning like how to do it from like instruction manual book sort of things. So this idea of disseminating this information, and some random dude from Pennsylvania building a plane from the ground up, shows the fact that this information is available for consumption. And it's one thing to look at it now, but it's wild to look at just what the thought was centered around, like all of this sort of stuff, like all of the, like each and every component and aspect of the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. We are 50 some years removed from the events.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to get in that mind space of all the things that weren't really that regulated that should have been.
Yeah.
The example you gave for the plane is like, yep, I can see someone doing that back then. Just, well, I like planes. I'm gonna go look them up, build it myself, and fly it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does he have a pilot's license? Probably should, but
Probably should.
he just did it. And this whole, we are in this wild west of sorts of air travel, even 60 some years after, well, 70 some years with 1903, the first flight.
Yeah.
And we still really don't know, okay, here's what we do, here's what we're trying to fix. And that we're also in a time of economic recession. We're in the midst of the Vietnam War. Plenty of things going wrong on this side. And, the Manson murders are happening 2 years before this. Was it 69?
69 was Helter Skelter, yeah.
Yeah. And, to answer your question earlier, my boogeymen growing up were more Jonestown and Heaven's Gate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't learn about those until I was older. When in school we studied cult figures and all of that, and that's when I learned about. It's funny because I actually learned the joke drinking the Kool-Aid, like the saying drinking the Kool-Aid, before knowing any idea where that actually came from.
Yeah. And by the way, it was actually Flavor Aid, but don't tell people that because Kool-Aid just makes more sense in their mind. But that's fine. We're talking about DP Cooper, not Jonestown. But yeah, we set up this interesting scenario where people can just do this
Yeah.
and sometimes even successfully get away with it. There are plenty of cases around this time where people are caught. They jump too early, or they have the right people following them, or they know their actual name so they can track them down. But when we get to this guy, introduces himself as Dan Cooper, this complete, utter enigma, this person who doesn't exist except we can see him right there.
Right.
Like, and it's possible for that person to get away because we don't have the surveillance we have today. And even with the surveillance we have today, there's still bumps in the system where people can get through the cracks. But I find it a harder idea to believe this could happen today. Not that it's impossible, mind you, but a lot more improbable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anything else
I
before we
feel
move on?
like in today's world, the only way that you accomplish this is if you have an inside person.
Mm,
Like, I don't think a single person could achieve this at a public airport, like at
yeah,
a regular airport, like some random private flight. That's a horse of an entirely different color. But like a commercial airport, no.
yeah, yeah. This is not going to happen the same way. So, let's go into some notes of interest about this case. Now, the first one, one of the hardest parts of anything involving true crime, scene of cryptid, or something like that, are dealing with eyewitness reports. And when you look through the descriptions that they give of there's 15 plus people on the flight that they interrogated, including crew, he had dark hair. He had kind of lighter hair. He was white. He was definitely kind of Hispanic, or he had darker skin. He had olive skin. He was 5'8". He was 5'10". He was easily 6'2". And you find that people don't mean to, but they don't always have the best descriptions in mind. Most people are not sitting down in the midst of a crisis situation going, okay, well, this is his exact height, his date of birth,
Right.
his social security number, so on and so forth. That they're gonna slip up, their memories are gonna go ajar. All it takes is for you to get a little bit older and you go, it was in 19, no wait, no, maybe it was 2000. Like it just happens. Your mind drifts because you're not focusing on the totality of everything you're experiencing.
Right.
But we
Right.
still need
So
eyewitnesses. Go ahead.
it's actually the cold case world that, like, I'm not nearly as in it as I once was. So this may have changed. But when I was in it, it was the cold case world that was really starting to make waves about a need to shift away from this idea of eyewitness testimony being king,
Yeah.
because so much research has been done to show the fallibility of hyper dramatic memory recall. Like, for somebody who witnesses a crime, almost immediately the brain will start to pollute the image, and you will start to you may get some things right, but inevitably something is going to get cross.
Yeah. And sometimes you're not even trying to lie. Your brain thinks it saw something. And or you fill in the gaps when you're asked, well, okay, what kind of clothes was he wearing? How tall do you think he was? And you don't know the answer, but you want to help. So you make something up that seems right in your head, but is not true because you don't know the specifics. Now, what kind of skin color did he have? Well, we have about 3 or 4 different tellings from the multiple passengers we have here in the flight crew. And unfortunately, that's one of the things you have to. Yeah, I agree with eyewitness testimony. It's not that it should be taken out forever, but it doesn't need to be on this tier system where it's the highest authority available because people,
Right.
like you said, are fallible.
Yep. Yeah. It's it's tough, right? Because when you're looking at like what it means for a crime to be solved, you're basically playing a giant game of Clue. Now, I don't mean to
Mm,
disregard what that whole thing actually looks like, or crimes, or anything else like that. I'm really not trying to be reductionist about it, but without the ability to be able to use tech to analyze materials in a hyper definitive way, outside of that, you are literally looking to the skills, or sometimes lack thereof, of those that are working the case and things like that. And that really has been like, when you look at how many cases go unsolved, or in an effort a to get it solved, they go with like, this is the most probable of options. And there are, when I realized, when we were shifting seasons of the show, and we were figuring out what the next case was that we were going to be showcasing on the show, and all of that. And I realized, when we were on a call with a rep from the Innocence Project, which, for those of you guys that don't know, it's an organization that helps wrongly convicted people be able to get a shot at a retrial, and all of that kind of stuff, kind of acting as advocates for those that
yes,
have been wrongly incarcerated. And
much needed.
yeah, when I realized how many cases every year get submitted to this group of people with finite resources, with finite funding, with finite team members, it's heartbreaking. You know what I mean? It's devastating to
Yeah,
think about. And so when you look at what this is built around, my, part of the issue is I don't necessarily see this clever mastermind. I see somebody incredibly opportunistic, that that was benefited by the time and the place, and the lack of understanding that was happening. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, I get it. I mean, and some of those places have the resources and they still screw up and they still have
Yeah.
to find someone just to get this case closed. And
Yep.
God forbid this happen at this time in history in a small town like with your Phantom Killer or something like that in Texarkana, where there's a yokel police force who doesn't really deal with murder or what have you, and there's a killer to run amok or what have you. Yeah, it's insane that
Yeah.
we take it as gospel that just because they say this is our guy, we didn't trust that implicitly. And I think when it comes to the Cooper case, for the most part, they did a really good job. They interrogated thousands of people,
Yeah.
like an immense number of people trying to find this person. And the leads just dried up. I mean, if supposing he survived, he was smart and said nothing. Or he did and no one believed him, or they didn't back it up or something, or look up any further investigations. But for the most part, they did a decent job. They scoured this entire region for months trying to find someone. There's been independent investigators who've looked into it, found no body, found no uh, money or anything like that that would have led back to it. So for the time, this is handled fairly well. But you are very right to say, and that's one very unfortunate part of true crime, is that some people just get convicted because they need someone to point fingers at.
Yep.
And they'll use whatever circumstantial evidence they have just to say that's our guy or that's
Yep.
our gal.
Yeah, that's just the reality. And yeah, from everything that I found regarding this, it would seem as though it's not like they didn't try to
Yeah.
find out. I think like I said, I think this is literally just an example of they hit the end of their means. He was able to do something that at the time, he was able to avoid the exact right situations and exact right people to be able to get away with it.
Yeah. So going back to these other little factoids, just a smaller thing. They didn't notice that he preferred Raleigh cigarettes. That's a big, I don't know, blend, whatever you say, of cigarettes. We're so far removed from the legalization of a lot of that I don't even know what I'm supposed to say, even though I grew up in cigarette country in North Carolina, pretty much. So that shows my ignorance. Something that we'll find more often as time goes on. Christians' ignorance is quite abundant.
Ha!
So, so
I mean, there's worse
outside
things
of,
to be ignorant about than cigarettes.
you know what, that's fair. I just like making fun of myself. I'm my favorite target.
When
So
Josh isn't around.
outside, when Joshua isn't around, of course. So once again, outside of the general threats of kidnapping and explosive reprisals, if people didn't do what he said, the crew and the passengers pretty much all stated that Cooper was very pleasant, kind, and was even witty with them on this trip. Like he wasn't treating it as a joke, but he joked about what he was going to do after this. He offered tips to multiple crew members, even of the $200,000 ransom. He was even offering them tips before he tried to take over the plane.
Yeah.
But they all declined it due to company policies about tipping. And even if they had taken it, for sure they wouldn't have been able to keep it
Right.
at this point in time. So I think they were just being very incredibly smart about this. Your thoughts on tipping aside, which I believe is an abomination, pay your people what they deserve as wages. But that's its own issue. That's an American thing. So when asked by one of the stewardesses about whether he had a grudge against the airline, Cooper simply replied that he had nothing against them, but he had a grudge. And there has been countless speculation on what this means.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was there some official he wanted to mess with? Was there a bank he wanted to just steal the money from? That's why he chose a specific spot. Was he just doing it for kicks, or was he doing it to prove to someone that he could do it? We don't know, because we don't know where he is.
Right.
But it needs to be said that specifically, if we can trust him at his word, he had nothing against the airlines himself. Now, several years later in 1980, some of the money was found because they had a specialized list of these specific serial numbers. If we see these in circulation, we know he's been here at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
They were found in outside of Vancouver, Washington, by Brian Ingram, a young kid who was 8 years old at the time. And the family had known of the case that had happened 9 years before. So seeing these here, knowing that it floated down, it was kind of outside of anything, just kind of clumped together. They brought it to the FBI's attention. They didn't believe him at first, but they kept going. And that started a very brutal process with this family of trying to get the money back because, hey, they found it, finders keepers. And a long legal battle happened. There was marital problems that happened. Young Brian himself had immense issues with drug abuse and treating his spouses incorrectly that he later sobered up, as I understand, and is now far better than he was. But it all started with him finding this money. So they kind of called it privately between them like the Cooper curse, that they had found the money at all. And with the FBI's investigation, they found nothing conclusive about the case, no fingerprints or anything, nothing that could lead them to a potential suspect. So there's good old Brian there, looking happy until the bad things happen. Then we have this, which I think I knew about this before I did my research, but I don't remember for sure, so I'm not going to claim credit. There was, starting in the 50s, I believe, a Franco-Belgian comic that ran in the Tintin magazine. Good old Tintin. Love my adventures of Tintin. And this comic was called Dan Cooper.
Mhm.
It was never printed in English, but people have speculated it would have been available to soldiers who fought in Vietnam, maybe even in Korea, that who might have shared it with their American counterparts. There were several UN teams on site in both of those wars, so cultural contamination through that could have happened. And contamination sounds bad. Exchange would be a better word. So in these comics, Dan Cooper is a pilot hero known for his feats of bravery. Like he'll jump from a plane, with no parachute or just one parachute that might work. It happens multiple times over. So some think this is where the Dan Cooper of the DB Cooper case got his name from. That has never been definitively proven, once again, because we don't have him in custody.
Right.
This case still has several items that have not been revealed to the public. This is all done in the interest of a very reasonable matter of not allowing hoaxers to spread misinformation and having pranksters call in and say, I'm DB Cooper, I did it. But when they say, oh, everything is just publicly available, that's when people can discount them and say, oh, you don't know about this. So we still don't know exactly what those things are. Not even the witnesses that brought it forth. The FBI has closed the case in 2016, officially suspended everything. So I think I've heard conflicting reports that they've released everything or they've still held on to something. So we don't know. Is the end case about that? Joe, what are your thoughts?
That I think, and this is a thread that I'll pick back up when we get to the suspects portion of the conversation. But I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks to actually finding resolution or finding, knowing the full breadth of information is, you got to think, this is the prevailing thought. And I say it like that because I'm not sure if there is a counter thought to it, because I've only ever heard that part of the reason why he was able to get away with everything is the timing in which he did it. There wasn't enough time for officials to rally and actually be able to stop the plane from taking back off
Yeah.
after it had landed. And a big part of the story here is a giant black eye for the feds. And so that being a thing means that they're not really going to want somebody else to come in and solve the case for them or do what they haven't been able to do and all of that kind of stuff. That it almost reads like damage control. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. One thing I did find in one of the books I had as reference, I don't have it with me, the second is Skyjack, is one of the new leaders of the case in like 2009 to 2011
Yeah.
actually posted anonymously to like forums dedicated to solving this case, sending them, say, hey, I have this guy on the inside who's found this out. What do you guys think? And hoping maybe that would lead him to someone has having these private, you know, citizens just look into it.
Yeah.
Nothing really came of it. But yeah, this whole the bureaucracy of America never ceases to amaze, and that we got to look good. We can't show weakness. We got to find our man. And if we'll just say, well, he's probably just dead, so we're going to close the case. We win. The end.
Yep.
Doesn't really feel like a win, but you kind of almost save face in some respects that way.
Yeah.
Not
Something like
really,
that.
but yeah. It's. I brought the ATF earlier. Even to this day, they celebrate Waco as a success on the anniversary every year,
Yep.
saying, we did it, guys. And if you look into that case, that's definitely something we'll have to do along the way. With the thousands of other things we could pick for topics of how the absolute failure of the ATF to do their job, the misinformation that was running around. Like, look, these government agencies are supposed to be there for our protection, but they're also led by people, and people are screw ups. That's all I'm going to say.
Yep.
So you ready for some suspects?
Yes.
All right. These are not every single suspect. I just selected a few. There was no like parameters of like, well, I don't think they're good enough or I don't like the case. It's like I just picked a couple because we only have so much time. Joe has a life outside of this. I'd like him to get back to his wife and, see her again. We're just going to do about 5. Our first being Lynn Doyle Cooper. This is a man who had accumulated some wealth through unknown means at some point in his life. His niece in 2011, Marla Cooper, revealed that around the time of the hijacking, he had been talking to one of her other uncles about doing something outside the means of the law. And later, around the time Cooper, several hours after that had happened, had come back to their house bloodied, presumably from the fall, perhaps, what have you. Uh, and he was also obsessed, in her words, with the Dan Cooper comic. So that would align with that part of the case if that's true. However, a point against him is that from what little DNA evidence we do have from the culprit, his does not match. But there is speculation against that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the DNA on the tie that we have that, excuse me, that Dan Cooper had came from him. It could have come from someone else.
Mm.
So, any thoughts on good old Lynn before we move on?
No, I mean, if the story is what it is, then he's a very reasonable suspect.
Yes, I don't disagree with that notion. He was high on my list for a bit. I changed to others along the way, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to get angry with someone who says he's their top guy
Right.
because there's over a dozen we could have chosen.
Yep.
Next, we get to Kenneth Peter Christensen. And one of the reasons he's looked after a lot is because he is a former paratrooper. And one thing I forgot to say earlier is that they speculated, the FBI, that whoever was behind this knew what he was doing, asked for a front and back parachute, just in case one didn't work or what have you. So that shows possible competency, possible familiarity with parachutes. Who would know better than a paratrooper? So he was accused after his death in 1999 by his brother Lyle of the crimes. He smoked. I believe he used Raleigh cigarettes. I forgot to put that in the outline. And was very partial to drinking bourbon. No words on a 7-Up. And would have been qualified to successfully complete the jump given his military training.
Yeah.
However, despite the photo we have there of a composite sketch of Dan Cooper and him, he doesn't completely match it, which, once again, that's based off of faulty eyewitness testimony, so we can only go so far. And he has been officially disregarded by the FBI as a suspect. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, this one very, very predominantly seemed like just reaching, like somebody, one or two of the boxes are ticked and somebody wants to make a splash and all of that, and so they go ahead and try to finger somebody who's already passed on and that sort of thing. Like, this one doesn't seem to hold any water at all.
And it should be noted, too, that some of these we're going to be mentioning are brought after the fact, and people have sought book deals, they've sought movie deals, and some of them have successfully gotten what they wanted based on the premise that the person they want is the actual D.B. Cooper. Which, if that's true, there's nothing wrong with the idea of trying to seek financial compensation from it. I mean, you got the story, tell your story. But it also brings a little damper on it. It's like, are your motives pure? Do you actually want to get whoever this, I'm gonna say killer, we're not doing killers for this episode. Yeah. It's like, I understand the hesitancy to get on their side because they're seeking out a movie deal or a book deal or what have you.
Yeah. That's why I would, like, for me personally, I would be more inclined to only like make it a prerequisite that some kind of scientific evidence could link or substantiate what you're saying in order to like get some kind of, compensation or something along those lines, because it's a no-win situation for anybody who's involved with somebody who's full of crap when coming forward about these things, because the publishing house, they look like idiots if the person's wrong. Anybody who gave them the time of day to talk about their book, they look like idiots if this thing is wrong. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you got to protect yourself with. If you just go willy-nilly and just say, yep, this is definitely our guy, and it's proven false like 10 minutes after you write the book and publish it, and it's in millions of people's hands. Yeah, you've got their money, but are they ever going to trust you again?
Right.
So next up on our list, we have good old Ted Braden. Also a military trained skydiver. He was a convicted felon. He multiple charges of misuse of funds, of trying to sell things that weren't his later on in life. He was also a deserter who left for mercenary work in the Congo. So he left Vietnam to go to the Congo for more money, I think was his idea. So, okay. He was also, like I said, serving in Vietnam currently. He was honorably discharged despite this because, if I remember correctly, they just didn't want to deal with that at the moment. So they kind of let it slide, which flies in the face of everything the military stands for, but that's its own thing. So
Tuck your
outside of his
SBC
height,
back in. It just popped out. Tuck that back in.
what?
I said your SBC just popped out. Tuck that back in.
I'm sorry. It's just who I am. So outside of the man's height, I think he was 5'8". He most matches the physical description of the composite descriptions. Once again, the height we have, I think officially it's anywhere from 6'1" to 6'0" to 6'1" is what they kind of look at more. I'd have to look that up again. So he'd be 4 or 5 inches shorter, but that's based on eyewitness testimony. So there are reasons to doubt him as being the one responsible for this, as of everyone on this list. Imagine that.
No.
So next we have Duane Weber. He is that once again him side by side with one of the composite sketches. On his deathbed in 95, I think I'd have to look that up again. He admitted to his wife, his third or fourth wife, he had a list, that he was Dan Cooper, which she didn't know who that was. And she knew he had had a checkered past. She knew that she wasn't his first wife. So she expected maybe he had changed his name or something, but then she did her own research, looked up Dan Cooper, looked up D.B. Cooper, and realized, whoa, is it possible? He did have this money, and sure, he was a salesman for insurance or what have you, but that doesn't explain everything. So she tried to get involved with the FBI. They didn't regard her as favorably. She kept filing and filing. Finally, someone took her a little bit seriously, but at the end of the day, they have said that he's not a suspect in their consideration. His fingerprints do not match what they have on file. Excuse me. So there's that one. Then we get into one I just threw in for fun. That's John List. This piece of trash is what is known as a family annihilator, as in he annihilated his first family. And I put him on this one mostly because that case is very fascinating. And there have been people who threw out like, hey, this happened not too long after he annihilated his family. He's going to need some money. What could he do? He's got that trustworthy face. He just shows up on a plane, asks for $200,000, escapes, and then starts his own life in Virginia, if I remember correctly, with a new wife and kids because he had financial concerns. And that's why he murdered his family, because he couldn't possibly let them live in poverty. You know, scum of the earth, this man. But I just put him because he's on the list. I don't actually think he's an actual candidate. Most people don't. The FBI doesn't. But it's fascinating to put him on the list anyways.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well have some. You might as well have some fun with it. Yeah, I had no idea who this dude was before prepping for the show.
Yeah, that like I said, there are no words to describe how much debt. No, what's what I'm looking for? Yeah, how much I despise people like him.
Yeah.
Like he was the reason I learned what the term "family annihilator" was.
Yeah.
A complete. Oh, and he hides behind Christianity too. That's another reason why I'm he couldn't let their souls be in torment, so he had to get them to heaven as soon as possible. But he could make it.
Well, there you go.
uh, not my favorite person.
No.
We'll put it that way. Joe, anything before we get to the final judgments?
Yeah, so I actually have a mystery sixth option that I ran
Yes.
into in prep for the show. So I had made a comment before about how there's this group that I was trying to see if I could find before the name of the group, but it's essentially a group that has sought to analyze particulates from the tie in an effort to be able to find that what they were looking for was strange materials, they called it. Materials that would have been very unique, that they could use to, like, if this material was there, then it means this sort of thing. Because over the years, so many different pieces of DNA would be over the tie, people handling it, this, that, or the other. And so they wanted to go in a very specific direction. And they actually found metal particulates from a specific factory in, I believe it was it New York, where they made like steel parts for airplanes, specifically for
Yes.
airplanes. And this person would have known, like, the interworkings of an airplane because of their job. And come to find out, the department that would have handled this specific material at that time was only like 5 people. So we're not talking about a huge sampling. And so through some investigation, they ended up with this dude, uh, Vince Peterson. Yeah, Vince Peterson from Pittsburgh. Was seen, he passed away in
Yes.
2002. And like there's some shots that people have put together that specifically they have his a picture of him. It's not the best picture, it's like off and to the side and only half of his face, but with the sunglasses pick that people have concocted. um Again, I think it's compelling. The people who are doing it are still trying to, a lot of what they've been doing is boots on the ground detective work, because the feds have been stonewalling them pretty much at every turn. And so right now they're embroiled. They actually sued the feds to try and get access to a specific part of the tie, because the idea being that if this person tied the tie, there's the inside part, an inside clip within the tie that would have held it together, that almost certainly would have protected DNA evidence on it, because it'd be tucked into the material and not exposed to the elements in the same kind of way. And so they're hoping that they'd be able to find a higher concentration of DNA evidence on the inside. But again, the feds are not playing ball by any means, and so they're trying to get their hands on it. But they're like, they're the ones that came out in January of this year, putting forward the Vince Peterson thing. And they contacted the family's actually been surprisingly open to different groups that have been reporting on this thing, with the idea being that they don't, whether it's the classic case of, oh, that wasn't the person that I knew, or it's just simply them, A plus B and they've gotten X sort of thing, where the family doesn't believe that it's their loved one that passed away, right? They don't believe that it's this Vince dude. And so specifically his daughter is trying very hard to, like, she has appeared on behalf of the family to try and advocate for the feds giving up the tie and access to, because she's, I guess, that convinced that it would be the means to clear her father's name, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's for me, and the way my brain operates, right, and the fact that I was a scientist before anything else, I care deeply about those sorts of facts. I care deeply about the science of it all, rather than the speculation of it all. Where this person was military, and so they could have done this, and they would have been at the airport on the 12th of November. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you could squint and cock your head and get 17 different people that fit that same profile. And so to me, something like that, even if it's not like, if forced, and we always go here to the final judgments, right? If forced, I'm gonna have to go where the largest amount of evidence is. But if for nothing else, I'm like, come on, like if other than either trying to save face or not wanting the mystery to die or anything like that, like you doing this analysis is not, is really, it's a no lose sort of situation, because you get to see who, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that you're protecting the family of the criminal, but
The family wants it.
yeah.
Yeah. Real quick before I respond. Hello, Matthew. Nice to have you around.
So
General Kenobi. So what I should say after saying hello there.
hello there.
Yeah, I did look into this too, Vincent. I find it fascinating just how recently this has been done. Like it started in 2022, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fact that we have a group committed to doing something about this speaks
Yeah.
volumes to me. When you've officially closed the investigation, what do you have to lose?
So one of the things that I find fascinating is they released insofar as this is the manufacturer that would have been working with this material, and then again they went quiet, right? That was going to be, they were stonewalling again. Well, they would not accept that and went straight to the company and started asking them, like went right over the Fed's head on doing like boots to the ground investigative work and that's how they found out that like the group that would have been working with it at that time was only a handful of people, and thus like if that is a suspect pool, it's not a very deep suspect pool.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a narrow list of people
Mm-hmm.
that you could easily disregard as soon as you had the proper DNA or what have you, just to
Yeah.
just test it. What do you have to lose?
Right.
Uh, unless there's something we don't know about. But yeah, um, this case is crazy. I'm glad we were able to talk about it. And once again, if your pet hypothesis, your suspect wasn't brought up, that's not because I didn't think they were worthy of being on here. For the sake of time, I only focused on these five, now six. So we're gonna head into our final judgment. Joe, you've already said it. Is there anything else you want to add to yours?
No, I mean, I think when you look at something like this, and I did some quick and dirty math when you were asking before, and if in a very very rough estimate, it would be over $2 million in today's currency, with what he made it away from. So like it's not outside of the realm of possibility that you lose part of it and get away with part of it, and you still have made money. It's one of those things that I think is easily mythologized because of the frankly outlandish nature of the crime, right? Like, and just the fact that it reads like a good story, and as Westerners, that gets eaten up gladly, right? And so I can see how somebody like this becomes this manner of folklore. I guess to me, the more intriguing thing is if we retrofitted science, if one of these cases had somebody step forward and push the envelope and break open, and for all of you legal fans out there, create a precedent for the use of this technology, these systems, a through line to be able to get evidence showcased and unpacked and declassified or whatever by the government. How many cases that frankly are more significant than something like the DB Cooper case, how many of those cases could then turn around and be solved? And what does that do for modern law enforcement? Because at the end of the day, right, wrong, and indifferent, these people have a lot of power. The people that make arrests, the people that solve crimes, the people that investigate these things, they have a lot of power. And so even if I am 1000% attempting to be as charitable as possible, at the very least, shouldn't we be equipping those people with the parameters that best dictate that they get the right person, that they do their job, and
One would
all
hope.
of that? You would hope. I mean, I can't go any further into the subject matter without tipping my hand and no longer being charitable. I am nearing the end of my rope.
You're restraining yourself well.
Yeah. But I just, to me, that's the interesting thing. That if we really could, if somebody could break the walls down and make it so that way the lens of public understanding and knowledge is so bright on these situations that there is no more hiding behind, we just needed to get somebody because it look good. And for anybody who listens to me right now and says that this doesn't happen, look to small town America, do your research. This happens on a regular basis, like just an unfortunate amount of time. Yes, we live in a world where everybody's got a camera in their pocket and nothing goes unseen, quote unquote. But these things are wrongly handled on a regular basis. So why don't we equip the people who are out there trying to solve these things and do better and do good for the community and all of that kind of stuff? Why don't we equip them? And for those that aren't and are doing shoddy work, why don't we hold them accountable? Why don't we create the parameters so that way they can't do that anymore? You know what I'm saying?
Yes. It's a lot harder to falsify in this scenario. Yeah, I'm completely 100% with you, and I'll refrain as well in solidarity with you from my personal feelings on the matters. So, as far as final judgments on my end, out of the people selected, once again, there's plenty of others who make a good case for their personal pet theories, hypotheses. I'm going to go with Ted Braden. Due to him having the military experience for it, looking closer to the composite sketch and the physical descriptions provided, uh, being able to jump from that plane, possibly live, and we still don't know if he survived or not. That's kind of a sub mystery inside the mystery. Did he make it? That's kind of, well, I guess it depends on where you see the story. Are you folk hero, DB Cooper sticking it to the man and just jumping out to freedom with most of the money he tried to get? Are you, I don't know, are you like 100% conviction? We got to get this sucker. We can't let anyone go free. Like, he deserves to be found. We need to find the body, or we need to find the person.
Yeah.
I'm on the, for justice's sake, yes, that there is no moral means of him doing this. He held people captive, threatened their lives. If he had a bomb or not, either way, the threat is there. I would like him to be caught, but he hasn't, that we're aware of. And you would think if he had been caught, people would want you to know.
Yeah.
So I go with Ted. My backup pick, if that one doesn't pan out, I'll throw Dwayne. He's a con man. He's got multiple felonies on his list. I think he had military experience too, but not with paratrooping. I'd have to look that up again.
Right.
But once again, the DNA does not match what we have on the tie that has been left behind. So that is a huge strike against it, in my opinion. Well, not opinion, that's more like fact. And there we go. So what do you guys think? Who was DB Cooper? And why did he hijack Flight 305? Was he one of the suspects listed tonight or someone completely different? Do you have your own pet theory? Throw it down in the comments. Let us know. We didn't touch
Also,
everything. The history.
from
Oh,
a
yes,
psych
go ahead.
perspective, from a psych perspective, I'm fascinated. So if you're watching this and you're a true crime aficionado, I'm fascinated as somebody who like that psychology worker part of my brain is like, what makes you tick? Why are you so fascinated with crime stories and stuff like that? But if you're somebody who's watching this because the specifically the DB Cooper case is of particular interest, I'm curious why. Do you view him as the everyman that took a shot at Big Brother, or the big corporation or something like that, or is it just you're fascinated by the machinations of people who commit crimes and things like that? So chime in below. I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, very much so. So tonight we didn't touch everything that history and folklore have on the subject. So let us know in the comments below. Is there anything else you'd like to follow up on? What Joe has said, what I have said was like, hey, there's so much we want to hear from you guys. Like, we're not just doing this just to hear our own voices, as fun as that is. There's so much more out there. In the description below, you can find the sources used for tonight's program. Next time, we will be moving on to our next category, ufology, where we will be discussing the mysterious side of Area 51 and whether or not aliens have actually visited us there. Now, before we leave, Joe, will you plug yourself real quick?
Yeah, I mean, you can hear my sultry tones live every Friday and Saturday morning for Kingdom on the Road and Let It Rip, respectively. And I also have a weekly podcast called Buddy Walk with Jesus, where right now we're in the Acts Project. We are endeavoring into what early estimates are coming in to be like a 2-year long process going through the book of Acts. And I also have a Ninja Turtles channel called Shell Shock, a TMNT series that you can find on the YouTubes.
Yeah. Regardless of where you go with Joe, you can know that somewhere people will get washed.
Yep.
And that amuses
Exactly.
me.
Yep.
You can find me obviously on Systematic Ecology podcast and YouTube. I do Spidey Swing Bys here as well. Friday Night Frights, of course. I do my own podcast, Let Nothing Move You, where I am currently going through the book of Genesis, about to be in the book of Exodus next month. Let's see. I am about to, because I'm not doing enough. God help me. Because I'm not doing enough, I'm starting another podcast fairly soon called Why I Don't Like, where I will be covering different anime, comics, movies, and going through, hey, this is what I don't like. This is what I would like to praise, just so I'm not being overly negative the whole time. But there are some things out there I need to systematically destroy and let other people know why it's bad. So if you care about that, look for Why I Don't Like coming your way on all the podcasting platforms. So that's it. Thank you guys for everything that you do. We'll see you next time.